Bonjour, and welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast, where you are invited to taste and see that the Lord is good. Gospel Spice is your Christ-centered podcast, infused with in-depth biblical flavors and sprinkled with a dash of French culture to spice up your relationship with God. Here is your host, Stephanie Roussel, with a guest today.
Bonjour, and welcome on this conversation that I had today with two people who really inspire me. I know I say this a lot with a lot of conversations I have because that's the whole point, right? If I wasn't passionate about what I'm sharing with you, then I really wouldn't be sharing it. But truly, this one, I read the book and then I awaited this conversation with giddiness, anticipation, excitement, a little bit of shyness. I was a little intimidated to meet the two people that I'm sharing this conversation with today. They are coming to tell us about their book, and even the title of the book is so whimsical and yet so profound. It's called Why Everything That Doesn't Matter Matters So Much. I mean, you literally could write a book about that, and they did. So, have you ever asked, what can I do to mend the world, to mend my family or my own life? And if I could, is it worth it? Should I bother? Does my own small part in the world really matter? And so today, multi-Grammy-winner Charlie Peacock and his wife, delightful author Andy Ashworth, come to share their encouragement. And their book is really a collection of 16 essays or letters. It's called Why Everything That Doesn't Matter Matters So Much. And it's for everybody. It's in all stages of life, all walks of life. And they are here to share their wisdom, calling us to discover and to join God's mission to love and care for a very hurting world. They're sharing honestly from their own life experiences. It's probably what I've enjoyed the most, the vulnerability, the transparency, and oh, so deep. They are beloved and trusted mentors. They give us thought-provoking explorations into the many facets of the Christian culture care, the Christian culture making, all the way from the kitchen and hospitality and generosity and gardening, all the way to Carnegie Hall and Grammy Awards and all of the splendors of music making. They talk to us about a theology of imagination, of creativity, a vocation that's going to provide a framework for all of life. And I've found them providing a model for expressing love in marriage, in friendship, in citizenship, every kind of work, even in the midst of our culture of cynicism, fear, exhaustion, oppression. I have found that each one of these 16 letters is a gentle, wise, humble, vulnerable, and thought-provoking nudge in the direction of God's powerfully ordinary purpose for each one of us. It doesn't matter what the future holds, because we're invited to participate fully in the beautiful redemptive work of Christ. Can you begin to see why I can't wait to share this conversation with you? Now, let me tell you quickly about my guests. Charlie Peacock is a Grammy Award-winning, Billboard chart-topping music producer, composer, and recording artist. He's the co-founder of the Art House and Wedgwood Circle. He's the founder and director emeritus of the commercial music program at Lipscomb University. He's the senior music editor for Christianity Today, and he's the host of the CT podcast, Music and Meaning. Now, his delightful wife, Andy Ashworth. She's the author of Real Love for Real Life, the Art and Work of Caring. We'll talk about that with her. She's the co-founder of the Art House in Nashville, and there she served for over 2 decades through hospitality and mentoring. She hosted a wide range of guests and organizations as in the tens of thousands. She's the editor-in-chief of the Art House America blog, and she stewarded through that hundreds of essays from a variety of authors, including names that are so famous. But they're both so humble, the last thing they do is name drop. And it's my honor and my delight and my joy with a touch of intimidation that I am welcoming you both on the show today. So Charlie Peacock and Andy Ashworth, welcome with a big, open heart, warm welcome to the Gospel Spice podcast.
Thank you, Stephanie. So glad to be with you.
Okay, so I'm a little intimidated right now, I have to say, because the book we're going to discuss today, it really got under my skin in the best possible way. So you wrote a series of essays, each one of you taking turns on different topics. And so, Charlie, can we start with you, maybe, if that's okay? And I want to... We're going to go through several of the chapters, and my jaw just dropped at some point in the book because you basically quote something that is a sentence that we have raised our children on, my husband and I, ever since they were little. It's actually so meaningful to us that on our ministry, Gospel Spice, we literally have merch that says that, and you literally have the quote in your book. And I'm like, oh my goodness. That was so exciting. So you say, our quote is, there's nothing you can do for God to love you more. There's nothing you can do for God to love you less. And we've always said, as parents, we're hoping on a good day we can say that about ourselves to our kids. Obviously, our love cannot ever be fully unconditional. It's always complicated, but with God, it's true. And I know I've spent the better part of 3 decades figuring out what it means. But you literally say, and you call this one of your pearls and sparks, and we'll get to that. That's going to be part of my question. You say grace is sufficient for every sin and error, and love is so supreme and unconditional that there's nothing you can do to make God love you more or love you less. I love this so much. So this is what you call a pearl and a spark. Can you tell us what pearls and sparks are, and maybe what they have to do with what you call oceans of possibilities?
Yes, I'm speaking there, I think, in the letter to artists. But it really is a letter to all followers of Christ. And so we each have, as our vocation, an ocean of possibilities. We'll never get to all of them, but they are there in the same way that we stand at the seashore and observe the ocean and its grandness and vastness. There is a vastness to the potentiality or human potentiality. And it's not because of us per se, it's because of our Creator. It's because of what the image of God that's embedded in us, the power of imagination and creativity. And so one of the basic pearls that sparks great creativity is freedom. And the world has an idea about freedom that is so much more about the autonomous individual. Whereas a person who follows Christ, their freedom is constructed of something that is imparted to them. It's given to them. It is a gift of grace. And one of the ways that you are able to experience the most open, beautiful, wide freedom is through understanding grace. Because if you know that God's love for you is secure, then you are able to risk. And you're able to dream dreams that may seem too extravagant for you. They may be too grand, right? You don't have anything left to prove. Everything's been proved for you. You don't have to do anything to make God love you. You can just live in this place of freedom. And then even if you don't achieve what your big dream is, then you're free to accept that. You're free to say, well, yeah, I guess the timing wasn't right. It's not what God has for me right now. But just that ability to go way, way out into the ocean of possibilities or come way, way back in to just say, I'm just one small little human in the cosmos, right? To have that kind of perspective, that is a pearl to which all great treasure is formed out of. And that to me is what has held our marriage together. It's been the foundation of my artistry. And it's the way that we've tried to raise our children as well. as you guys are, clearly.
You said that we don't necessarily, achieve all of the dreams in that ocean of possibilities. What do you think heaven is going to offer in terms of oceans of possibilities? Do you think that maybe those dreams we are not fulfilling on this side of heaven or for the other side?
Well, I do believe that everything that is good, whether it's thought or enacted, has a place in the new heavens and the new earth. That is at the heart of it. So, because we are living in a time when all our best efforts are tinged with sin, all our best efforts are proximate. None of them reach the 100%. You know how on Instagram we all put the 100% or put fire or whatever it is. It's like, no, it's a spark. It's definitely a spark, and it might be 99%, but it's never 100. And we all live with that. And I think part of that, the beauty of that, of sort of missing the goal, is knowing that we are people of expectation. There is something embedded in us in the image of God that has an expectation for the fullness of goodness. And so I do believe the new heavens and new earth will be that fullness of goodness.
And to dream ambitiously within the framework of God's spirit and presence is a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. That's why I get, it makes me very sad when I see Christians denigrate what is functionally godly ambition, or when they denigrate the accumulation of skill and ability. It could even be people who denigrate theological studies or something like that. I remember when we were really young Christians, they used to call seminary cemetery. As a we didn't know, but we heard people around us denigrate the idea of getting a theological education as if it were sort of a dead effort, dead on arrival, like it was completely unnecessary. And that was really a product of the time in the late 1970s and early 80s. But we don't believe that. I mean, we believe that that God has called us to lifelong education, to learn anything and everything everywhere, in as much as He opens those worlds to us.
You do say, one of the quotes I'm going to remember from the book is, "Be where you are and go where you're sent." Which is what you're saying. Just be fully involved in what you're doing. I have a good friend who's getting a little older, Jill Briscoe. I don't know if you're familiar with her and how much you know her, but she says, just go where God sends you, go where you're sent, and just minister there. That's one of her mantras, and it's just so powerful. You're talking about, and Andy, I want to get to you, but just one follow-up question. I'm telling you, we could spend hours. I have so much content that I've just learned and soaked from your book and your wisdom. So I'm trying to draw out the wisdom for everyone listening or watching right now, so that they too want to tune in to what you're doing and read the book, which is so full of wisdom. I felt, how can I say this? It felt a little bit like some spiritual parents who were writing to me. I mean, I could be, you could be my parents age-wise. And so it really felt like I was gleaning the wisdom of your generation, your expansive experience of working for the kingdom. But, and that's my follow-up question, I guess, maybe not necessarily in what people would call a Christian way or explicitly Christian. And so you have an entire essay, Charlie, on what it means to be a Christian artist, quote unquote, and how you actually don't like that term. Do you want to tell us how, as Christians, we can be these agents of love and fruitfulness and goodness in the world without necessarily having that label stamped on our foreheads?
Yeah, I think I would like, every one of my brothers and sisters that professes to follow Christ to just ask the question and ponder for a moment, what would it be like if you lived in a world where you couldn't declare that you were a Christian? How would that change the way that you acted and spoke? Because there are people in the world who do live under those circumstances, and yet they are completely authentically Christian. And so what I found out through being involved in contemporary Christian music was that the power, the last 40 years has built this sociological need for niche branding. And so everything is an opportunity to brand, right? And to create a mission statement for, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to being God's musical artist, it's just too big to belong to a brand alone. It's not to say that you can't participate in a community, that has a name or that calls themselves Christians, in as much as we do when we go to our Sunday fellowship with other Christians. Of course, it's all contextual. So when I argue for myself not using the words Christian musician, it's because I don't want to be branded according to this brand and genre of music called Christian music. It's not that I don't sometimes participate in it. I do, but I participate in all kinds of music. And so anything that might restrict me from being faithful, and I think that's the principle at stake for everyone, regardless of whether they're an artist or a musician, is that if there's anything about Christian naming that restricts you from faithfulness, you should do your best to avoid it.
Amen. Especially in a culture where that very word Christian has, the meaning is just so different, or it means, obviously epistemologically, like it just means so many different things than what we think, how we're expressing it. So use words that cannot trigger darts your way.
That's right. And trigger assumptions that you don't embrace. For example, we could have a conversation where, because of your understanding and your empathy and your curiosity, I might say to you, well, of course I'm a Christian musician, based on what you've told me, based on what your understanding is, right? And that's a one-on-one relationship because we've built that safety, right? And my desire is to be accurately known. Your desire is to be accurately known. And so we accurately know each other. And now we have a bridge of safety, and we can use these words and they mean something. But you get out on the street, it's a completely different circumstance.
It is. My family has only lived in the States for 8 years at this point. And this actually is the first time in our lives that we're in a setting where, well, at least 8 or 10 years ago, it was okay to be openly Christian. Not so much anymore. Things have really changed. But when we used to live in Muslim countries or in atheist countries, and as you're describing, it was a very loaded statement. We had to be really cautious who we shared this information with because of the true risk of being misunderstood. And you're saying one of the great ways to do that is through building relationships. And one of the best ways to do that, and Andy, I'm turning to you a little bit, is the spiritual gift that you've displayed for countless decades at this point of hospitality and generosity. So tell us how you have how God has hardwired your life with this desire, this people-centered desire to love through hospitality, generosity, cooking, among other things. Tell us about all those things.
Well, it started with our the beginnings of our life in following Jesus. And we lived in a little house that we rented. We had been through a very difficult beginnings of our young marriage, got married very young, went through some hard things. And we came to this place where we began to see with different kinds of eyes. And we were both so grateful to have this little house and to have our children, to be together, to have each other. And both of us were stirred to, we're so grateful. We want to share what we have. It was as simple as that. It was as genuine as that. So we began to share, whether it was a living room floor that had a bunch of green shag carpeting on it from the from
I can
from the
picture it. You describe
70s.
it so well in the book.
Yeah, and not much furniture, but there's some rug, you can sit on it. We can we can have a Bible study, or we can just come and sit and talk to each other. We just started hosting musicians who were from out of town that needed to come and rehearse. So as naturally as that, it was about response, gratitude and response. And then it grew, and that just grew and grew in every house we lived in. And then we moved from California to Nashville, and it grew exponentially because then everybody wanted to come and visit and needed a place to stay. And then we bought an old country church with a vision of having a place where artists, but then it grew from there. It began as a place for artists to come and have teaching and fellowship and community in an actual place that was a very interesting place, and that we were kind of coming into the history of that place. And we were only in our young 30s at that time. And so we started this work. It was called the Art House. And a few years later, we moved our family into that building and began to make that our home. We began to renovate, and we had a recording studio, and we hosted things for a larger community, but we also began to have a lot of dinner guests and overnight guests and guests for the week and people who are making music there. And this whole idea of having this place and having a work of hospitality, it just grew, and it grew small, and it grew large, and it grew for years. And I found my gifts inside of that. I found my gifts as I responded, as people were hungry, and I kept learning more and more and more about food, and kind of expanding my repertoire and my recipes and my experience, and also growing in really just the experience of having relationships and understanding that people needed the same thing I needed, which was attention and care and conversation and inspiration, and how all of those things would, and that beauty mattered. It mattered a lot to me as I went to people's places that had beauty to offer. I was already a gardener, but I became much, much more of a gardener as we created this place. So all of these things were coming together, and family life was right in the midst of it all. And I just really grew to understand relationships are just center for me. They're just center. And I have a lot of joy, and had a lot of joy as I got to know people, and as we would sit around the table and have that beauty of table fellowship that could be really, really simple. It could just be people from the studio coming in, on a break and sitting together and eating together. It could be different than that, more than that. And but I found all these components that were important to me, that God was placing in me to learn about and love and respond to and grow in expertise and experience. And so it's the particularities that were given to me, but that also are kind of human need oriented as well. Food and shelter, very, very basic. Relationship, very, very basic. And then we all have, the ways that we're given in our place, in our city, in our whatever gifts we have to live these things out in different ways. But that's the way they grew for me.
I love the intentionality of the life that you built. And again, really anyone listening, watching this, you need to read the book, because I'm sure as you were listening to Andy, there were questions about, but wait, tell us more about this or this or that. Well, it's all in the book. So you really want to read it. Really, it's just really amazing. Andy, you define in the book success. And I heard you, having read the chapter, having listened to you and hearing you, what you've described here is in a way your definition of success. And just like I was telling Charlie how I loved the quote on, God's love being basically completely gracious and unconditional. In the same way, I define success as delighting in God. A day that has been spent where you have delighted in God in whatever shape or form it takes. In French, so I use French a lot, right? So in French, we have the word delight is délice, which in English would be delicious.
I like that.
Because in French, you have two words. You have delight and deliciousness. In French, these two words are both the same word, délice. We don't make a difference between delight and deliciousness, which is why we like food, which is why this is called Gospel Spice, and which is why, Andy, I love your, your recipes and your cooking ministry. Because in French, God is both delightful and delicious. It's one thing. No wonder scripture says to taste and see that the Lord is good. It's the same thing. So that's how I would define success. And your definition of success, would you tell us what it has to do with fruitfulness, which has to do with food again? So tell us, Andy.
Yes. I just think it's where I want to set my compass. It's very, and we're caught up in it right now because we have a book, right? So anytime you're putting something out in the world, all of a sudden you are confronted with what are the numbers? And you have, so it's not something you can really escape, but I want a bigger vision of what a good life is. And I think that Jesus has given that to us as he describes the fruit that he will make in our lives. And so it's fruitfulness. And I learned that just kind of those two things, does successful really capture a human life as God sees it? And success is so often used in terms of numbers, metrics, how you count the value of a human life. And I think this beautiful word, fruitfulness, being in the vine and just being given the life that God's the one who can make fruit, and we get to participate, but we can't measure it. That's not our job to do, is to measure it or to see the eternal, to see even, to try and say, well, that was a fruitful thing we did today. It's not our work. And so it frees us up. It frees us up to be people who can do the things that God brings into our life to do, to be with the people he gives us to be with, to use our gifts, and to say, Lord, these are the things you've given, help us to follow you in them, to kind of have this open palm life, like two hands out to God. We're pilgrims, we're followers, we're following you. Lead us and guide us, Good Shepherd. And then I think there's such a rest and a trust and a beauty in that that's, and then there's a particular scripture that I came to in my older life that was, it's Psalm 92, a little portion. They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. And that to me was, again, a promise that it's always God who's renewing us, who's making us able, who's leading us on. And the fruitfulness is his. And we get the joy and the delight of participating. Yeah.
But from now on, it's all just going to be delicious.
That's right.
I'm just going to say everything. I'm just going to, that's just delicious.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you for that.
Sure. Charlie, how do you see the mystery of God at work in the life of Andy bearing fruit?
I really see, for me, Andy is always a sign and symbol of trust. And because at the heart of our striving, or at the heart of measuring ourselves, or comparing ourselves to our neighbors, or experiencing disappointment because we're at number 22 on the chart instead of number 1, or whatever it is, I think that God has given me this beautiful partner who, by the Spirit, has a true trust that God is enough, and that the gift of the relationship that she was invited into is enough, and that no matter how many people write books or do podcasts that come up with the next latest, greatest, best, path to God, that somehow she has already figured it out, so that is a mystery that I have to return to again and again. And partially because of that is that even though we've lived our life together in what is functionally, among entertainment corporations, I've been the point person. So I've been out there, I've been the perpetrator and the victim, and I know that world inside and out. I know what it feels like to feel like, you're not good enough. Your numbers aren't good enough. You're too old. You put on too much weight, whatever it is. And there's 100 different metrics in the entertainment industry. And probably most profound is how much it is the polar opposite of God's great generosity, in that even if you've been to the mountaintop 1,000 times, you're only as good as the last time you went. You're only as good as your last great story. And that kind of pressure on people, I don't even know how people do it without having this counter narrative that the gospel is. I mean, if I didn't have that counter narrative and have a person in my life like Andi, who keeps coming back to, the fundamentals, and because she's living it, not because she's saying, hey, you need to come back to the fundamentals. It's just like, I just have to look at her and listen to her. I don't even know how I would survive it. It's so absurd, and ridiculous and non-delicious.
Yeah, not very delightful, any of those things. And in spite, and you share very openly in the book, and it's another thing I love, and why I've really enjoyed sitting at your feet and trying to soak up as much of the wisdom of inside your book as possible, because you're so vulnerable and open, and you really don't mind sharing all of the foibles and failures because you understand grace, because that does not alter your perception of your identity and how God really sees you, and that's freedom again. And so in spite of the tremendous successes you've had in all of the definitions of the word, you, Charlie, are battling with chronic pain and migraines. And I relate to that. I have migraines. I have some measure of chronic pain.
Sorry.
You describe a nervous breakdown that you had, that you're still living the consequences of. Would you give a word to someone listening or watching who is going through something a little similar to that?
Yes. One of this, not everyone reacts this way, but I would say the majority of people react this way with chronic pain and really debilitating pain. Is there's a tendency to really close in and you want to figure out how to get yourself small enough that somehow, if you shrink down and you have the least amount of contact with people and least amount of contact with the world, that somehow the pain will reduce, and you'll be able to, maybe you'll just pass out, and have some relief. And there's I've not only have I experienced this, but I've had it explained to me, by numerous neurologists in books and in person, but in reality, the remedy that we so often need is we just need a few safe people to which we can say exactly what it is. We don't have to be performative in any way. We can just tell it exactly like it is. And then they don't try to fix us and they don't judge us. They just let us be. And once you've experienced that a few times, then you can live in the spectrum of your ups and downs of the chronic pain. And every time that you're like at your worst, it doesn't have to be this, okay, now I have to tell them all again what's happening, and that's, I feel, is probably the best advice that I was given, is just to have a few people in your life. Obviously, Andy is the key person for me, but also to have talked to my children about it. My children have participated in my recovery, have taken me to the doctor, have been a part of, even my daughter went with me in my first ketamine treatment session that I did. So, and then our closest friends, they know about it too. And then you can begin to, like for me, and I'm sure for you as well, we all develop, I think the first inclination is like, let me just sort of go for everything and try to see if I can find anything that gives me any relief, right? So is it Tylenol or acupuncture or cross training or whatever it is? You run the gamut of all of those things. And then we eventually kind of get our menu. And, having read the book, I describe what my menu is, so I've gone from being a person that was, as if the headache wasn't debilitating enough, the medication, was triply debilitating. So I've gone from being a person who was non-functional at one point, because of all the medication that I was on, to being where I'm largely medication free today, and just use some simple wellness techniques to moderate the pain. But I live with chronic pain every day, but I don't live in the culture of chronic pain.
That's absolutely key,
Yes.
isn't it? Because it's a mindset shift that really changes everything. It's like grace. Once you've integrated it, it really changes everything, even if on the outside, the pain, whether it be spiritual in the case of grace or physical in the case of chronic pain, it's kind of the same thing. You're experiencing an embodied form of grace.
Yes. And I first experienced this with tinnitus, which I have in my left ear. And it was something that preceded my neurological breakdown. And the tinnitus used to be so loud. It was like I literally thought I was going to go crazy. I was so panicky from it. And now most of the time, I don't really hear it. When I lay down at night or wake up in the morning, sometimes it'll be more profound. But it's as if I know I have it. I know it's there. I know I have some hearing loss in that ear, but it doesn't demand my attention as much. And the headache, And I have a lot of other symptoms as well, but they don't demand my attention until they reach a certain threshold. And that's sort of like just a part, I think, where we all have a threshold of our own smallness and weakness and brokenness. And you kind of just get to the point like, you know what, everybody, I love you, but I got to go to bed. I got to put on one of my cold caps and take some emergency med and just get in bed and listen to a book on, Audible or something.
I like your perspective. You were saying, it's a reminder of our smallness and our weakness. And this isn't in some kind of, worm theology. You're really just saying, hey, I remember scripturally speaking that I am dust. And that's just the embodied manifestation of that. There's a term you use, both of you, in the book. You call it too muchness. So, Andy, in light of everything we've talked about, hospitality and, chronic pain and all of the things, and, how to have a Christian voice that you don't necessarily call Christian in the world today, what is too muchness, and any advice about that?
Well, too muchness has meant different things for me. Of course, I'm 68 now, so I've had, decades of experiencing that in different places and different times of life. And I think we both felt it very much in our 25 years of living in the art house and doing so much hosting and, having so many different parts to our life that were big and ongoing. And so we would always come together and say, how can we have a more sustainable vocation? How can we have a more sustainable life that we're just not feeling this pressure? And so much of it was self-induced pressure, So sometimes we have a favorite place that we have been to a few times, and if you've never been there, you would love it. Anybody would love it. It's called Laity Lodge, and it is a retreat center in the hill country of Texas. And we both remember sometimes we would go there, we'd just be so filled by the peace and the people and the great teaching and the place itself, and floating in the river on inner tubes. And we would pray, Lord, help us to leave this place and come to more wisdom on this topic of how to have less self-induced pressure and tension and strain. And we'd make good choices, and then we'd get caught up again. But I think some of the things that helped us were they're so basic, but we have the more ability in our life to put in practice having some boundaries around what we say yes to and what we say no to. And I know that we've always had that. We've always had that choice. But I think we understand that we need to make that choice, even now as we're, older, and we do have both have chronic pain, and we just feel our limitations more. And we've always had them. Everybody has them. It's very human. I think that is the wonderful thing to understand, is that God has made the world. He has made us. He has made human lives with limitations, 24-hour days, the need to sleep, the need to have not just one thing that overtakes you all the time, but to have play, to have friendships, to have delighting in the people around you, to take walks, smell the flowers, just take these small things and breathe them into your being and say, thank you, Lord. I'm noticing, I'm paying attention. I see that. I hear that bird. I see this flower in bloom that's going to bloom this one time in all of this year, it's going to bloom right now. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to pay attention to it, and I'm going to be thankful for it, and I'm going to take in the beauty and be nourished by it. Sabbath is really important. The principle of, the one day out of 7 to have an other kind of day. And that's been important to learn and to put in practice, but never perfectly. And I think that's always our mantra throughout the book is we do everything is proximate, never perfectly done. There's always grace. That's where we live. Our standing is in grace. So that's where we're not going to get anything perfect, including having our Sabbath day, or our boundaries, or our, all those things. But we're always learning and trying to, I guess, be healthier in all the ways that there are to be healthy. But we're still on the road. We're always on the road. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, you use the word proximate a lot in the book, and I think it's a good word to anchor our faith on, because it's nothing we do is perfect, even with God, working through us, and when we are his hands and feet in so many different ways, it's never perfect, including and Charlie, I'm going to turn to you as we are wrapping up a little bit here. Probably my favorite, I had a hard time picking a favorite. Not that I need to pick a favorite chapter in the book, but I was like, okay, like, which ones do I really want to share with my husband, who doesn't read nearly as much as I do? Like, which ones can't share the whole thing? And one I'm definitely going to share with him. Charlie, you wrote about talking about Jesus in the public square, and talking about, proximate work. That's definitely probably way up top the list. And you use an expression I love that you call the hope of humble explicitness. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, first, I want to give props to our friend Stephen Garber, who we got the term proximate in its application that we use in the book from. And he's actually writing a whole book on the topic. So watch for that in the future. But yeah, he really inspired us many years ago now to make that a part of our vocabulary and a part of our theological understanding of the way life is put together. In the same way that Steve's term, or Stephen Garber's term, proximate, became so important to us, as I was thinking about writing and speaking again in the public square, because I'd taken some time off from it, I was like, I really need some words. I need an anchor, to start to sort of build this on a foundation. And as I played with words a bit, I came up with this idea of, okay, what does it mean to be explicit in terms of Christian profession, declaration, and then using language that is associated with the history of Christianity? And then what does it mean to do that in a humble way? And I meant for the humility part to also encompass words like empathy and curiosity for others and listening to others. And so that became the foundation for me to begin thinking about what would it be to write again and to put that out into the public square. And from there, the next piece that sort of fell into place was the idea that, well, it would be then this humble explicitness in my writing would be shaped by someone, anyone, anywhere in the world looking over my shoulder or listening in. And then that brought me to the idea that, like, well, yes, because of the internet, there are no hidden rooms anymore. There's no back rooms. There's like everything is the front room, right? Everyone enters in. And so that really took me down the road of doing even more work than I'd already done on how I articulate ideas, how I write, how I take ideas that are foundational Christian theological ideas and reframe them in ways that make sense to me as an artist and also make sense to me as a neighbor, to any neighbor who may or may not profess to follow Christ. So that was really the when I was thinking about those ideas, which was probably over 10 years ago now, that was just kind of a moment when I came back to it. I had done a lot of thinking about it, but then it was like, okay, this is really important again. I had no idea how important it would become come 2015 and all the way up to now, that it would be really an essential skill set for navigating the public life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Your entire book, I feel, is soaked in a sense of holy expectancy towards your reader. So what's something you're hoping to generate in the reader through this, through your collection of letters? One of you answer that maybe briefly, as we're running out of time.
Let's see.
Riff some words.
Yeah, I have. Well, encouragement.
Yeah.
Encouragement, inspiration in terms of, how to envision your life as this beautiful gift that God has given you, and that all of the parts, the small things that are hidden and unseen, matter to God, matter to you in your lifetime.
Matter to us.
Your neighbor, your friend, your family member.
We see you and we hope you see us.
Yeah. Even the hidden, quiet work of the church being the church, of the family
without
being
any
the
fanfare.
family. Just
no advertising.
Yeah, no advertising, no bullet point, no big billboards or social media posts, but just the good and quiet work of all these different threads that make up a life in Jesus, and that goes out to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. It's big, and yet it's very particular, and we all have a different part to play. So,
yeah, that is why everything that doesn't matter matters so much. Well, Andy Ashworth and Charlie Peacock, I could keep on asking questions and talking with you, but we need to end here. So thank you so much for your time, for your heart, for taking the time and having the imagination to create these letters for us. They will be treasured. I know that. I've learned so much from your wisdom, from your humility. I've truly learned a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that encouragement.
I am in love with God more as a result of Him through your eyes, through the course of the book. So thank you for that.
That's a really beautiful blessing. Thank you, Stephanie.
Hi, Jonah here. Thank you for being part of the Gospel Spice family. If you've enjoyed this episode, you will love receiving our newsletter. It contains value-packed free gifts and rich content each month. It's at gospelspice.com/sign-up. There is always something new and exciting happening around here, and I don't want you to miss out. Sign up at gospelspice.com/sign-up. Did you know Gospel Spice has a YouTube channel? There's exclusive content there too, so join Gospel Spice on YouTube. Also, please give us a star rating and a comment on your podcast listening app. Your reviews actually really do make a difference to help others discover and experience Gospel Spice. As always, we are praying for you. You can confidentially email us your prayer requests and praise items at the email address contact@gospelspice.com. It's our privilege to pray for you. So, I'll leave you with 4 things to do. Please pick one and do it at your convenience. 1. Sign up on our website for our newsletter to receive gifts you're going to love. 2. Find us on YouTube and see what content we've put together to help you grow closer to Jesus. 3. Rate Gospel Spice on your listening app. It's one of the easiest ways to share the gospel. And finally, 4. Tell us how we can pray for you. Merci.